Welcome to Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. We're going to go into the tail end of the week and into the weekend with more winter weather across the region as northerly flow aloft will continue to send systems out of Canada, reinforcing the cold air and occasionally bringing a little bit of winter weather with a little bit of snow, as we'll show you here in a moment. It's going to be a chilly, brisk day. There's going to be some lingering snow in parts of Montana, northern Wyoming, western South Dakota, across the mountain areas today. Basically the remnants of what came into the region yesterday. But for most of you, it's just going to be a cold winter day. Another system moves out of Canada, splits though into two pieces, but that split can end up producing an overrunning snow event for those locations listed there. It's not going to be a huge amount of snow, but it'll be enough to accumulate and will certainly impact Interstate 80 and Interstate 70 in the region if you have travel plans from late Friday through the weekend. Very cold air comes in behind this system. It won't be as cold as last weekend's weather. That's hard to beat, but it's nonetheless going to be below average. And if you're below average in January, you're cold. Possibly next week, the splitting trough could finally maybe bring some rain and snow to the southwestern United States, parts of California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of the southern Great Basin, Four Corners area. You actually may have a little bit of precipitation finally. We're looking at the pattern getting a little bit more south with this pattern change. We see a break next week. I think there's going to be several days next week where there won't be a lot going on. The one kicker, though, is that system that will affect the southwestern United States. It kind of needs to be watched. If it takes a turn more north, that could change that break statement there. We'll talk about that. Also, we're still looking at that first week of February. Got some things to sort out in the Pacific, but we're keeping an eye on things to see if we don't have another Arctic outbreak in parts of the U.S. during that time frame. Wanted to show you this. I grabbed a satellite image yesterday that shows snow on the ground. You can see from the Houston area along the Gulf Coast all the way up to Virginia from that storm system that went along the Gulf Coast. So this is a satellite image you just don't get most of the time. More snow on the ground in Louisiana than over most of Iowa and Nebraska. Same could be said for Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and parts of northern Florida. Just incredible. And we had more pictures come in from the storm along the Gulf Coast. I mean, how often in Panama Beach City, Florida, can you go out and catch snowflakes on your tongue or build a snowman or walk on the beach with snow? So just an incredible situation down there. A windy day yesterday. Some of you may have been caught in some heavy snow showers. We had some snow squall warnings. Northwest flow aloft will do that. And you can have these little clouds like this. Doesn't look like much, but look at the snow coming out of these snow squalls, these snow showers. You can get that in really cold patterns when winds aloft come in from the northwest. And some of you experienced that yesterday. Yesterday was a day where you could have blue sky, then be driving in zero visibility just a few miles down the road. As we take a look at the pattern between now and the weekend and early next week, there will be more opportunities for snow, colder temperatures, and wanted to show you this. Jan Curtis put together a time lapse of a lenticular cloud that formed earlier this week along the front range of northern Colorado. We call these lenticular clouds, sometimes we call them standing lenticular clouds because they'll tend to form in one area and not move very much. But when we put it in motion, when we animate it, you can see how it stays basically in the same position, that cloud forming along the top of the wave feature that is developing in the atmosphere. Just a wonderful time lapse there of the formation of that lenticular cloud as strong winds from the northwest aloft earlier this week helping to produce that. So thanks, Jan, for sending that and putting that together. When we take a look at the satellite imagery this morning, you can see the leading edge of the northwest flow pushing cold air and low clouds and snow flurries south across the plains. This next wave up here is what's coming as we get into tomorrow night and Saturday as the high pressure ridge along the west coast and off the west coast, allowing systems to come up, around, and down. And that's exactly what we'll see. A little less busy on the national front in terms of winter storm conditions. There's still a lot of blue here along the coast for freeze warnings all the way into the deep south again. More lake effect snows in Michigan and New York State. These are winter weather advisories. That pink area, winter storm warning for parts of Montana, northeastern Wyoming, into the Black Hills of South Dakota from the system that just went through and anticipating the next one. The brown areas, high wind warnings. High wind conditions will develop along I-25 and I-80 again today and up near the Montana-Canadian border. Unfortunately, Southern California getting into some strong winds again, but more down towards the San Diego area. Notice the stormy weather. We can't forget about Alaska. A lot of winter storm warnings and watches for winter weather in Alaska because of that next cold wave for the forming up there. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that. Closer to home, if we focus in on Wyoming, you can see where the winter weather advisories are. A lot of these are for early in the day today. So travel along I-25, I-90 up into the north, 1820 Douglas to Lusk, up into the Black Hills area. You're going to see some wintry weather, and here's the areas of strong winds today for travelers. Just wanted to show you this. This is the temperature anomaly across the United States for the last 7 days. Quite incredible when you take a look at that. And when we end the month of January, we may see that all of the lower 48 states, or most of them, will end up with a colder than average January. One reason for that, the changes in the Pacific. Very briefly, when we take a look at the subtropical regions along the equator, there's your La Nina. We're still technically in La Nina, and we'll be here for a little bit longer. But the eastern side of the cold waters have warmed considerably. You can see the orange and reds here. So if we were to go back and look earlier in December and November, we would see that the La Nina would have stretched all the way across the area. But when you lose the eastern half here, where it starts to warm up, this changes the dynamics of what goes on in the Pacific. This area of warmer water temperatures in the North Pacific as well changes the dynamic. So the jet stream behaves a little bit differently. And as we showed you in podcast before the turn of the year, as we got into late November, December, we talked about the long-term trends. These warmer water temperatures here will start to favor high pressure more over the water than over land. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Where you see these red pink areas here is where high pressure wants to be forming. And anywhere you see these red areas on either side, you'll see these blue and green areas because that's where the low pressure is. So it always goes high to low, high to low, high to low. So this big high here in the Eastern Pacific, this is for Friday, shows you where you're going to have colder weather downstream. For most of November and December, these red and pink areas were more focused over here. And that shift westward is something that we see that will continue into the month of February. And you can see it very well here. This is for tomorrow morning, the high in the Gulf of Alaska. So the winds aloft come in from the northwest, and here comes the next wave, and then it splits. As it splits, we see that cold air rush in late Friday night into Saturday, comes down the front range of the Rockies. Moist air from the Pacific comes up from the south, and they collide. This looks exactly like what we showed you yesterday. There's going to be a ribbon of light to moderate snow along this axis as the warm air overruns the colder air. Finally, some rain for central and southern areas of California and into the Sierras, even into Las Vegas. And finally, seeing some precipitation in northwest Arizona. But there's going to be a little bit of a snow event. It's thin. It's not very wide, but we'll need to watch it. There's also going to be, as that low comes out of Canada, more snow for Montana and northern Wyoming. It won't be heavy, but there'll be another little round of light snow up there. That's what the snowfall looks like between today and Monday morning. And if we zoom in a little bit, you can see some pink and blue areas there. So along sections of Interstate 70 and all of Interstate 80 here, you're going to run into some snowy travel conditions. It's amazing how sometimes these bands of snow just want to form right on top of the interstates. Kind of crazy that way, but that happens a lot. So folks traveling late Friday into Saturday, early Sunday, keep that in mind. And here are the temperatures for the next 5 days. So you can see the anomaly is still very cold throughout the western United States. Now notice all the red colors up here in Canada. Temperatures there are above normal, but this happens when you have a strong displacement in latitude. of air masses. When we have these big Arctic outbreaks, when you see Canada getting warmer relative to average, that means that colder air is being displaced south. So it doesn't mean it's really warm up here. It's just warmer than average. The colder air gets displaced. That's how it works. If this map was all green and blue, we have bigger problems. But this is typical to expect this. So don't be looking at that and thinking, oh, Canada's boiling. It's just that relative to average, it's colder because of the strong displacement in latitude of cold air. Now, by Wednesday, that low that splits off and the California coast begins to head east. We haven't seen this in a while, and we need to kind of keep an eye on this guy. These guys can be a little tricky when they get cut off and then move across the area. But as it goes from California across Arizona into New Mexico into the southern plains, there may actually be a little bit of moisture with it. And here it is. You see this? This is from Monday through Thursday of next week. So Southern California, Arizona, and New Mexico, you Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma here, you could get into precipitation again. Haven't seen anything really wet down here in quite a while, as there's been a bias of systems that go more to the north. But look between Monday and Thursday of next week in this area here. This is the quiet weather we talked about. There's going to be a little bit of a break. So there's a break in the weather Monday through Thursday of next week up there. What we have to watch is maybe a more northward movement of this precipitation band right here. We'll have to keep an eye on it because sometimes they'll kick more north than it shows. But there is going to be that possibility finally for moisture for you folks down there and snowfall as well. Then when we start to look at that first week of February, this is the weekend after this one. So February 1st is next Saturday, and here's that area of cold, moist air and a lot of Arctic air up here we've got to watch. If this high pressure ridge establishes itself again here, rebuilds, this will come into the west. But this is what we have to watch. If this low merges with this low over here and cuts off the high pressure ridge, then it's a more zonal warmer pattern. So we have to kind of just assess things. Don't want to get ahead of the cart ahead of the horse, as we mentioned yesterday. But this area has to be watched right here, because if it does come in, it's going to be a big weather maker into the first week of February, the first half of February. So we'll keep an eye on it. But we do have a little bit of a break for a lot of you for about a 4-day period next week. Have yourself a great Thursday. Stay warm. We'll see you tomorrow.